Make sure you use this and leverage this to have a point of difference versus the person down the end of the street.
Hello and welcome to Food Waste Matters. I'm Dr. Joanne Freeman, here with you from Honey and Fox. In this podcast, we're all about sharing those real-world success stories in reducing food waste. We're focused on the practical side of things, how small changes can lead to big differences, and most importantly, who are these people leading the charge in this space? So today we're shining a spotlight on the food service sector. This industry is a huge part of our Australian economy, employing over 900,000 people annually. But there's another side to this story. This industry is also responsible for approximately $6.4 billion in food waste, which accounts for about 17.5% of our nation's total food waste. But to put this into perspective, the average food service business could be leaking up to $66,000 each year due to food waste. Yet monitoring their waste, for quite legitimate reasons, seems to be on the back burner for many. So to unpack this further, we've got Tony Green on the show today. As the CEO of the Australian Foodservice Advocacy body, he knows the food service inside and out, especially when it comes to its waste footprint. Hello, Tony, and welcome to Food Waste Matters. So, Tony, can you tell me about AFAB, who they are, and what's your role?
Thanks, Joanne. Great to be here. Great to talk about a pretty passionate subject of mine, which is a little bit weird being a chef. But anyway, food is passionate and waste is a big thing. Let me give you a little bit of context about who AFAB. We're only a 3-year-old non-for-profit industry association representing food service. And the idea really was born out in the middle of COVID when everything was shut down, including our industry. So to be clear around the 4 key areas that AFAB play a role in this project is really around voice of the food service market, being the conduit between the project and the industry, being an activation lead. So when we've got a plan, how do we now activate it? And then ultimately just being that expert within the food service space. So they're really the 4 key areas around how AFAB support this project. And the realization from a lot of industry stakeholders that government and media really didn't quite understand let's call it the back end of hospitality and tourism. So what actually helps the thing tick and survive? And that's got a lot to do with the distribution and the food and beverage manufacturers that sit beside it, not to mention the primary producers. So in the middle of COVID, I was asked to be involved in some strategy work around if there was another association, what would it need to look like? It can't be more of the same, of course. So after 6 months of deliberation, and we felt that we had a really good proposition, we all sort of looked around the table and if we're going to activate this, who's going to do it? And me being way too emotionally connected to this project, put my hand up and quit a very well-paying job in the middle of COVID to start as the CEO of the Australian Foodservice Advocacy body. But it was really important, a really important, necessary step. And we're 3 years in now and doing great. And
so can I ask, Tony, AFAB, advocate for a whole lot of sectors along that supply chain. How
Yes.
do you get them all together, from a producer right up the chain to the service sector?
Yeah, great question. It is a challenge. There's no association out there that strives to connect the whole value chain. So there could be a good reason for that. Maybe it's impossible, but we like to think that there's more that kind of brings us together than pushes us apart. So ultimately, it's really just about being quite strategic at the start to be able to go, who are the two, three, or four most important, influential players within each of those, within each of the value chain, and then being able to bring them to the table. And then it grows from there. Like once they're engaged, they start talking. Social media does a great job of being able to sort of connect people with certain conversations. So it's definitely a challenge. Not easy. We're not there yet, but it's building nicely.
Because I find with the work that I do, and recently I've done quite a bit of work with the producers, that end of the value
Yes.
chain, and they all seem to work in isolation along that value chain.
Yeah, yeah, it's 100% correct. But we're also connected. So while you have to be focused on your task and what you're doing in that space, that is absolutely necessary. We need to have that mindfulness that we're just a step in the chain. So we've got to be able to make sure that we know what our customers further along are wanting and needing, and that's really the role that we play within our channel.
So then, Tony, how did you get involved in food waste? What's the interest for AFAB in that space?
Yeah, I think a couple of responses. One's a personal interest. So part of my history, I've been 35 years in food service as a chef, sales and marketing in with food and beverage manufacturers, and then also distribution in food service. I used to work for Unilever Food Solutions, and they had this great program called Wise Up on Waste. And that was really my first introduction to an initiative about, coaching and teaching and mentoring hospitality around the opportunities to be more environmentally conscious, but also save some money as well. I think there's a real pragmatic approach to this where, you can put some effort in there. It's good for the environment, but it's also good for your back pocket. And with our industry being very skinny in regards to margins, every cent counts. So
Yeah.
there's that side of it, and so that project, I was responsible to launch it in Australia and New Zealand. Part of the launch, I went to WA on a mine site and conducted audits in kitchens. And that was, bin diving and sorting out all the waste and working out what was plate waste and what was prep waste and so on and so forth. And I just loved it. I thought it was a bloody great initiative and really worthwhile. And so that was my initial interest, and that was probably 10 years ago. And then from an AFAB perspective, our members are super focused on sustainability. We've got a lot of big corporate, manufacturers. So, Tip Top and Simplot and Primo and there are bigger foods. There's many of them. And a big part of what they need to focus on is being good corporate citizens, and sustainability being one of them. And so food waste fits in perfectly with that pillar. And I think primarily that role with UFS, and then AFAB's interest in making sure that we're making progress and we're bringing the industry together, are really the two ways that when in food waste approached us. I said yes before I even knew all the details. So I wasn't quite sure what I was signing up for, but I was really excited to participate.
So, Tony, you mentioned you have some of your members are quite big corporate organisations.
Yes.
What about the smaller food manufacturers and those smaller producers? How do they get involved?
I think the great thing about the program is that it really does suit everybody. There's something in it for everybody, and the smaller businesses, whether they be hospitality, whether they be manufacturing or primary producers, they don't have a lot of time and resource. They're generally working, you know, on the business, right? They're hands on, and they don't necessarily have a sustainability manager or somebody who's kind of thinking about this stuff. So the output of the projects is really about providing solutions for those, but making it easy for people to be able to pick up a document, work through it, work what might be some of their challenges, maybe do an audit, and it really just is meant to make it easier for the smaller people with less resource. But equally, it works just as great for the bigger businesses. They can just resource it quicker. So it's meant to be a bit of a shortcut, I think, for the smaller businesses.
So, Tony, tell me more about this project with End Food Waste Australia and what AFAB's role is.
Yeah, so we represent food service in what is called the sector action plans. And so ultimately, the sector action plans are about looking at particular channels within the food service industry. And at the moment, we've completed one of them, which is catering. But there's QSR, there's aged care, and ultimately that is about providing a plan for operators to be able to read through and then be able to take action on site about reducing waste. And it's ultimately led by conducting an audit within your business, being able to work out what the root causes are for that sort of waste in those sort of segments. And then it provides solutions for you to go back and look into your business and say, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. We can implement that. And then it's just a case of measuring and monitoring from there on in once you've made some concrete changes.
So, Tony, what was the process of developing, like the first one, for instance, the catering action plan?
Yeah.
What was the process you had to go through?
Yeah, it's been going for, I want to say, very close to 2 years from the initial conversations to now we've actually got ourselves a document. And ultimately, the core of what we've done within that time is a project team was developed. It was facilitated by In Food Waste. And basically, we just went through the process of being able to ask ourselves questions, do case studies, be able to bring that data back in, and then be able to structure it in a format in which the average punter is able to read that and be able to take some inspiration from it. But there was also involvement with Sam's been at our State of Play launches where we're talking about food waste. We've put sector action plans within our State of Play report, our AFAB State of Play report. There's been trade show panel discussions where the team have come out into the industry and engaged and been open for questions and dialogue around it. It's really been quite a proactive and energizing experience, actually. Really well managed.
So, Tony, the last thing you want is for this sector action plan, to sit on someone's shelf. So,
Yes.
where to from here?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the good thing is that we've still got some time. So ultimately, we would like to be in a position where we've probably got at least another sector action plan completed. And then there will be communication going out to the market. And ultimately, what we've got to finalise is that activation plan. So, as you said, documents no good to anybody sitting on a shelf. I think the process from here, if I was, the key highlights from my perspective would be we take that sector action plan, we go and engage with other caterers that weren't involved in the project. Sodexo were primary caterers that were involved in that project. So they're already on their own sustainability journey and were absolute leaders and pioneers. But there's other caterers that need to get involved. So for me, it would be about gathering up some case studies to then be able to get to a stage where we launch and activate. We've got some tools for people outside of this document. It might be an electronic format where audit information can be uploaded onto a website, progress can be updated onto a website so that we can monitor. Because remember, this project is about reducing food waste by 50% by 2030. And my calculations are we've got about 6 years to make a really, really big impact on food waste. And that's making me a little bit nervous in some areas. But I think we've got the tools and we're getting the tools. And it's just a matter of getting out there and getting people engaged in the program, being able to sell the benefits so because it takes time. You're going to have to allocate people. And that's the challenge. So it's all about activation. That's the big piece.
So, Tony, my passion is around working with the small businesses. So,
Yeah.
can you give me a scenario? So, recently I was in regional South Australia, and I, in fact, was talking to a very small catering firm. They had 3 people
Yeah.
employed, including
Yeah.
themselves, including husband and wife. So,
Wow.
How could this sector action plan help them? What would their process be?
Yeah, I think first and foremost they've got to be aware that it even exists. That's a good starting point. So how do we reach those people and say, well, are you interested in making sure that you're achieving? Honestly, I believe that from a B2B perspective, you almost want to open the conversation with the financial benefits. You want to be able to say, hey, we've got this program, this system, these tools that can actually help you be a bit more profitable. And guess what? It's also great for the environment. So I think that's the way the conversation opens, is around, do you need to be a bit more efficient? Do you have time and resource to invest in this to get this type of return? And if those questions are answered positively, then really once they've got the document, it's self-guided. It really is kind of that clear. But there needs to be somebody there that is the sponsor, is the supporter. I mean, it's a super small business, right? So that's
Yes.
relatively easy to manage, right? If one of the owners says, "Yeah, we're going to do this," it's going to happen.
Yep.
It's when it gets a little bit bigger, maybe there's 20 people or 100 people in a catering business. That gets a little bit harder because people come in and out, staff come in and out. Who's the champion? Who's the one that's trying to keep that maintenance? Because it's not going to deliver its full potential if it's just a once-off hit.
Yeah, it's continuous.
Yeah, it's a continuous improvement, it's a continuous monitoring, and things change constantly. So for those small businesses, you just need to have somebody. They've got to be aware. Next, they've got to have some skin in the game or some appetite to do that, and then really the sector action plan will take them through the rest. So it's about making sure we get that awareness out, which will be a challenge because there's 80,000 operators out there in food service alone.
Yes.
So there's a lot of people to reach, and that's part of the role that we play.
Mm-hmm. And, going back to the interview with this small catering company, he was also a chef. And one of the takeaway messages from him was, there's money in your bin. And it
Yes,
couldn't be
great
more.
message.
Yeah.
Yeah, great message, and that's the real pragmatic approach to
Yeah.
this thing. Is and what a great that's brilliant. I'm going to use that. That is brilliant. That's money in your bin. I love that.
Money in the bin. So, Tony, what are some takeaway messages you'd like to leave with us today?
Yeah, I think I touched on a couple of them, just with that last question. But ultimately, if you're a business that's along that value chain and you either have a strategic pillar that says we need to do better when it comes to sustainability, or there's this financial push to become more efficient and deliver more or just be financially sustainable, they really should be looking into this. If you're dealing with food, you should be looking into this.
Because it's coming, isn't it? That at some stage, businesses aren't going to have a choice. It's coming.
No doubt, and it has to. When you look at the amount of waste that happens, and what can be recovered, what those averages look like, it just has to, or else we're almost not going to get there. So you're right. It's being proactive, but you need to be engaged. There needs to be some sort of sponsor within that business. There needs to be like a super user or somebody that's really passionate. Normally, it's got to be somebody that's sort of in management, I suppose, because they can influence the team to be able to do what they need them to do. I would suggest that building a waste reduction KPIs into the team's plan is pretty important. If you're not measuring it and you're not holding people accountable to it, it becomes a bit of an optional, and it's very easy to get distracted. So I would strongly recommend that happens. I think there's a real benefit in, if it's a hospitality outlet, really for anybody, but customers are interested in these initiatives. And so make sure you use this. If you participate, make sure you use this and leverage this to have a point of difference versus the person down the end of the street.
And that's a really important a point, Tony, I think you're making there, especially for the small operators, that are trying to compete with the bigger operators. It can be their
Yes.
point of difference because
Yes.
that's building their sustainability credentials.
When it's happening now, There are cafes out there, primarily these sort of small agile businesses that are super passionate about environmental in all ways, not only food waste, and they've built their business on that. People are supporting that business because they stand for something and they feel good when they go and support a business like that. So I think that can be replicated and that can be a point of difference. But what I would acknowledge outside of those key points is that if you haven't been involved in it, it's probably a bit overwhelming, to be honest. You look at the sector action plan and it's, I think there's about 20 pages, something along those lines. So I think the simplest thing I would say is that if you're anywhere on that food service value chain and you're slightly interested in understanding more, I would invite them to reach out to myself, and I'd be more than happy to take them through that and just sort of coach them through it, because the more people we get involved, the closer we go to achieving our goal.
So, Tony, how do people get in contact with you?
Probably email's the best. So tony@osfab.org. You can head to our website, which is osfab.org, and all contact details sit on there as well. We just, our role is to help get some execution now that we've got some plans. So we're really keen to play our role and play our part. So please feel free to reach out. We'll be really happy to help you through it.
Well, thanks so much, Tony, for joining us today. And it looks like there's lots of work being done in 2024 for the food service industry. I will be following the progress, and it'd be great to have you back on Food Waste Matters this time next year and to touch base again to hear all about where the industry is 12 months on.
Thanks for having me, and it's been great to talk about it, and I hope the audience has got something out of it.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
And with that, we've come to the close of today's episode. So if you'd like to connect with Tony, all his details can be found on their website. And for everything else, Food Waste Matters, make sure you check out our website, www.foodwastematters.com.au. There you can sign up to get updates on all our latest episodes, and you can also take a look back at the valuable conversations we've had so far, complete with show notes and the contact details of all our guests. And if you're itching to ask a question or share your thoughts or even be a guest on our show, we'd love to hear from you. Just email us at foodwastematters@honeyandfox.com.au. So thanks for listening, and remember, every step you take can make a big impact in the fight against food waste. Let's keep up our good work, and I'll see you next time.